Dilip, I think we'll start and Mitali can just join as we go along.
Sure.
So we're speaking about withdrawing ads and can corporates do better? Mr. Cherian, everything is about a woke conspiracy these days. Whatever happens, it's just easily dismissed as this. And the irony of it is that a lot of these ads have actually tried to be more tolerant at some level. They've also tried to be more inclusive. But is it really unexpected? What's going on?
I think that we are living in an age of cancel creativity. People find new reasons to cancel you. What was a left liberal kind of tactic in America and many other markets and societies has moved self-consciously to the extreme right here. And I think that what's happened is that people are finding new excuses to be either taunted, insulted, upset, or horrified. And I think that the reason for this is because giving yourself a voice is much easier now. But what adds to the menace is the fact that you have lots of rabble-rousers waiting on the sidelines to pounce and join issue with you. So you could be someone who genuinely thinks that a particular ad or a particular piece of a lyric or a particular stand-up comic is insinuating something which you did not like, or that she had something to say which you were not able to respond to adequately. But what happens now is that your wokeness and your attempt to cancel it out of your environment is quickly joined by lots of people who I do not want to describe at this stage, but I may be tempted to later. It just seems that they're just waiting to help you join issue and make your joining the issue bigger than it is. I think broadly in any medium, you're able to today measure and figure out your audience quite easily. I'm mystified why corporates are doing such a bad job of it. I'm sure somebody has an explanation. But when we run large PR campaigns, we know exactly who's watching, what's the impact, what's the feedback, how many of those are potential customers, how many of them are just potential bystanders. So I think that it isn't very difficult, and that worries me that corporates are not able to figure out what they should respond to and how they should respond.
Mitali, can you hear us?
I can indeed, and I'm checking if you can hear me now, Jyotsna.
Yes.
We can hear you very well. Mitali, you're joining right into the conversation.
For being a tech klutz, first of all. But here I am.
No. So Mitali, I'm going to make you dive right in. At a time when we are always looking at Bollywood, we're always looking at our cricketers to stand up and speak up with the kind of silence that comes from the corporate world. Is that a big betrayal? Is that the ultimate betrayal in a sense?
I heard a little bit of what Dilip was saying, and so much of it is true in our times. But I think, Jyotsna, I just want to add a couple of other dimensions to the conversation. I came across a really interesting term called the viral consumer boycott. I think that's the big difference that we've seen in the last couple of years, which is that suddenly your consumer or your audience is, everyone has equal voice. The amplitude of everyone's voice is more or less equal on social media. So you get this instant reaction, not just from your target audience, but from everybody else that may not be your target audience, right? So that's one. There is a big whiplash that you could face from people who you did not intend for this to be targeted to at all. If you're doing an advertisement for a same-sex couple and you're talking about femme, you know,
Yeah.
you probably did not mean it for all these male reactions that you got, but here you are and you've got them, right? The second important point I just wanted to make about the fact of actions and consequences. So imagine that you're a Fab India and you put out this advertisement, and you did not, I don't think you intended for it to have the reaction it did. But you have a situation, Jyotsna, where you have physical stores, you have hundreds of employees, you have a responsibility to them as well. And you also have a situation where it is not necessary any violent action that may occur at your stores, where there are demonstrations or there is pilferage or there is damage or your employees are attacked, may actually see a consummate response. We've seen that, right? We have seen that where there have been physical attacks, there has been violence, and there hasn't really been any consequence for it. So I think as corporates, that's another thing you do have to be mindful of. Having said that, I agree with Dilip's point. For example, if you look at a brand like Benetton, they've been making some fairly sharp commentary about the life and times and taking a stand for a long time now. And that really was the identity of the brand. But I wonder for the others whether they intended to make such sharp comments about it, or whether they were trying to, take a certain line for their target audience, and then it just imploded really badly because of the nature of social media.
So Dilip, I know you mentioned earlier that the answer is actually quite simple, and I want to come to that. But before that, I'm taking something out of what Mitali said. Our general reaction would be to say that this happens on social media. It's a tweet. It's some tweets that are bringing you down, and it's a news cycle of a day. The tweets are going to trend for a day. Why can't the corporates hold on? But like Mitali said, when it goes offline with no repercussions, that is the consideration that we don't actually look at.
I'm hearing what Mitali is saying, and I'm listening to your question. This also is part of being what I would call overwork. Oh, I have to worry about my tender employees. 99.9% of the time, employees are neither injured and the damages are very minimal. Some bloke passing by will chuck a stone, because most of these, I'm not saying that corporates can afford to take a risk, and then there'll be breast beating later on saying, oh, every life is valuable, every person at risk is something that we should be concerned about. That's the job of the police to do. My point is that if you see this happening, who are you emboldening? You're emboldening that irrelevant person on the street who has lots of time on his or her hand to just scream and shout and determine the narrative. That worries me. And I think corporates, Benetton is a great example that Mitali gave, but I think that corporates have a larger responsibility to make sure that when they are pushing the right buttons, they have the courage to stay the course and not be, whiny about it and quickly back out. They have the option not to, and there are lots of corporates who have opted to stay safe. That's fine. But I think that we are now reaching the age of a new consumer where she is looking to see what values are you espousing and where are you taking me, brand. Those are the questions that new customers and new age customers are now beginning to ask. And when she asks that question, if there is an embarrassed silence that, oh, I just sold you a chocolate, and I wasn't even going to venture to show a man running onto the field, then the customer begins to look at you in a particular manner.
Yeah, actually, Mitali, Dilip is right. I mean, it's like when we asked Virat Kohli to stand up for Mohammad Shami, and that's the kind of leadership that we're looking at. Then why can we not expect the corporates to stand up?
So, two things, Jyotsna. One, I respectfully disagree with Dilip that this is the exception and, not the norm. I think acts of physical violence have actually become quite commonplace in India. I think they're brushed away quite easily as well. So we have to be cognizant of that. Secondly, you have to take 2-3 steps back to think about why are these acts of protest so emboldened, whether it's on social media or whether it's on the street. It's because to some extent there is license to do that, right? You have the confidence to know that your actions will not meet with the serious repercussions that they ordinarily should, because there is laissez-faire in terms of doing it, right? This Fab India example, for instance, Jyotsna, saw a lot of the ruling party MPs tweeting in pretty much the same tone. It wasn't a random troll saying, please take it down, and why are these women not wearing bindis? It was elected members of parliament who were saying the Abramanization of advertising today. So I think let's be clear about what the larger context is. The second point, Dilip is very right, and you're very right about the fact that who do you turn to, and are corporates standing up for what they believe in? I think there's one reality that exists, Jyotsna, which is that corporate India will always sit very close alongside with where their interests lie, their commercial interests lie. And at this point, if your commercial interests lie with a ruling regime or a ruling thought process, then you will do very little to rock that boat. You will probably go along with it. So you attempted something, it ricocheted. You're not in the game to stand over there and keep fighting till the last man standing. When I tweeted about this and the same thing about, what the consequences could be, someone responded saying, you go to court and you fight this and you stand up for what you believe in. I mean, frankly, I don't think they have the time or the energy to do that, because they understand litigation is a long, arduous process. So this is not, this is not something that they feel strongly enough about to actually stand up for. And, there's another example that comes to mind, Jyotsna, which is that recently Nike, as you know, came out with a very strong campaign against racism, right? The Black Lives Matter, they supported it in a big way. A lot of people thought it was great for Nike to have stood up and did that. And it was, but it wasn't, as Dilip was pointing out, based on no research. So Nike has a very strong sense of who their customer is. They understand that they appeal to the millennial consumer. They understand perhaps what their niche audience thinks about issues like racism. And then they take a calculated call about what their stand will be. But they are also emboldened by the confidence that there will not be any repercussions, that that will not see action, that will not see penal action if indeed it occurs. So I know it's a scattered couple of points, but that's what I'd like to say about the corporate mindset.
So Dilip, is there a subtle brand positioning in this environment that is going on?
Yes and no. The subtle brand positioning is what Mitali just described as sitting very close to the seat of power. Where I am coming from, the seat of power is now no longer the seat of consumer buying power. And I think that where the two diverge, there's an opportunity. I'm not saying every company needs to do it. It's, for example, the way the Zomato CEO responded worked very well, where he said, I'm not going to back down, and this is what I would do instead. What I worry about, if you ask me, is that, companies need to do a quick check, which is possible today given the deep data tools that we deploy for all our PR campaigns, to do a temperature check literally every 2 hours as to whether the campaign against you, not whether it's getting momentum, it may getting momentum, but are they getting more and more customer responses? And that, I think, is where you have new tools to battle new kinds of challenges. And I think that where I'm expecting companies to play a role is in assigning people to take a look and see whether the number of orders on Zomato is going down, say in a particular city where this event happened, or whether the number of walk-in customers into a particular store has reduced uh, while that imbroglio is going on live on whatever social media is
Social media.
handling it. I think that's where good research, good data points will tell you more stories. But that's the physics of it. The chemistry of it is, what do you want to be seen as? Do you want to be seen as a company that is, with the majority as defined by people who are defining the majority these days? And if the majority feels insulted, you should immediately retreat with your tail between your legs. Now, that is what worries me. If you want to be seen as that kind of company, then you're not going to be seen as an innovative company either eventually. I'm not saying one leads to the other, but innovative companies also tend to buck the trend. And companies that survive will be companies that innovate. So I'll stop here for the moment.
Now, it becomes a little bit of a binary thing, right? I mean, as it is with people these days, you're either with or you're against. In that same sense, people are naive out there. People are very easy to grasp in fake news if they're dealt it. People are very easy to want to listen to what they want to listen to, isn't it, Mitali?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jyotsna. I think so much of this is conditioning of what you want to see in a particular light. The thing is also, I mean, just picking up from what Dilip said, I think a large part of the problem for the corporates is also the fact that you're not thinking this through enough. There's literally not enough thought going into what you're doing. For example, I mean, we've discussed some of the instances where, the Fab India ad, or what happened with Red Label more recently, where there was a Muslim sculptor working during Ganesh Chaturthi, and then, that exploded. But it swings the other way. The Zomato hoarding, for example, saying MCBC for mac and cheese and butter chicken, people did not like that. But that's a different point of view, right? You don't like it because, and maybe you and I think, yeah, that's not cool. You need to pull that down. Similarly, the Kent RO ad, where they said, do you really want your domestic help kneading your dough, your atta, because, her hands are dirty. So you should use the Kent RO water. Again, this bothers us, but that's what the counter view might be, that bothers them. So this bothers us. So everything that bothers anyone should just be pulled off. I think people are just not giving it enough thought, frankly, Jyotsna. I mean, the Amul ads have been around for so long, but it bemuses me that in the last couple of years, they have turned so tame. This used to be a really sharp commentary on the life and times we live in. It was almost an R.K. Lakshman of the advertising world, but it is not anymore. And I think that, as Dilip was saying, is this stays between your legs sort of phenomenon where you choose to retreat. You keep choosing to retreat. But the larger point over there, Jyotsna, as you said, is thinking about why. I think it is also to do with the normalization of hate, where something that I would never dare to say to you in person, I can now say to you on social media under the guise of, an invisible handle, or I can just write anything out to you and threaten you with pretty much anything. And sometimes there's consequences, but most times there are not. So this normalization of hate, I think, Jyotsna, is where this, the advertising world and everything else, frankly, has just gotten merged in a rather toxic manner.
And speaking of this hate, Dilip, is the incongruity between retreating with your tail between your legs and then, on the other hand, funding hate. And that becomes really controversial. And yet, I mean, we kind of see that it carries on.
What is happening with hate is that we are now finding new objects to hate. Funding is easy, but as we draw ourselves up into tighter and tighter silos, everything becomes the other. Everyone becomes the other.
Yeah.
They don't think like me. They are, like, for example, he is vegan and therefore, I should shun him. Or he is carnivorous and therefore I should shun him. Becomes a phenomena where he has his gulab jamun with tomato sauce, therefore I should shun him. So it's now become ridiculous. The kind of siloization of what needs to be a textured society. By textured, I mean that, you see others as different, but you don't see others as the other that you want to hate on. The problem is that when you create a society of that kind, you're on a pretty slippery slope.
But the thing is that, for instance, now we've got this actress who's come out and spoken about independence and the ridiculed the freedom struggle and all of that, on the same channel where the anchor has left it unchallenged. And we have all these corporates, these big corporate houses who are now who continue to advertise in channels like this. So what will it take? What boundaries? There are no boundaries now for advertising, is it? I mean, it's not on the advertiser, but it is on the corporates. You can bow down.
Is that for me?
Yeah, for you,
Jyotsna?
Mitali.
Yeah. I mean, this is the industry that I report on. So I will say this. I think to expect to look to corporates for leading or standing up or showing rebellion or questioning authority would be a tough ask, Jyotsna. It's not coming from there. Perhaps at some point when push comes to shove, as you said, the funding alternates might change, where you start pulling out who you want to support versus who you would rather support because the environment is uncomfortable for you. But otherwise, I would not expect to see a large amount of talk back from corporate India at large, and perhaps even specific brands. I think on the point you made about Kangana, the actress, Jyotsna, what bothered me was the anchor who sat there pretty much, letting her go unchallenged. But what bothered me even more was the audience that was gathered there and applauded that comment. I think that's what we need to think about more carefully. And the same thing for these advertisements. I wish there was a way to make it clear that no religion is so fragile, Jyotsna, that some brand campaign can defame it. I mean, that really, are we giving it that much importance? Rituals are so personal for all of us. The way you perform a Diwali puja at home may not be the way I perform it at home, which doesn't make yours wrong or mine right. But it is this larger aggregation of majoritarian view, or just deciding ye galat hai, this is wrong, and everything tilts to one side, and then you decide to remove that and remove that and remove that till you're really left with nothing. You're left with wallpaper in terms of advertising and wallpaper in terms of trying to make a point or be progressive or any of that. Really, I think that's what really bothers me.
Dilip, if I can ask you pretty much the same thing, and how do you see this also unfolding going forward?
Expecting corporates to even tilt these windmills is like expecting the NCC to go to war with the Chinese. Okay, so let's hope we never get to that stage. I think it's individuals, people who have a viewpoint, and as far as the highly decorated star who chose to speak out to a manicured and calibrated audience, I think that these audiences are the equivalent of canned laughter during talk shows. So they are chosen because they are expected to respond in a certain way. There's no one else in the audience.
Yeah.
There's a vast, gaping hole of reality there. Just a bunch of carefully selected people who are either acolytes of the fan or adherence to a particular line that the channel is taking, which results in this kind of echo chamber effect. I don't think
But
that. Yeah, go ahead.
would a corporate, looking at what unfolded, say that, oh my God, I mean, this is all wrong, and this is a channel where I advertise?
I think that you can see that there is nervousness about it in the fact that Vineet Jain and the management have already come out to
Take out a statement.
try and sort of put out some of the flames. I think that there are signs that companies are getting nervous about this. Will they do something? As I said, it's like sending the NCC to war against the Chinese. They're not going to be able to do it.
Okay, Mitali, I'm going to quickly wrap up with both of you, just asking in your humble opinions, what is it that corporates can do to, stay with us?
I think, Jyotsna, the thing is that is it in medicine that you use this term, which is basically do no harm? Do no harm. So even if you are not able to, because now progressive has also become a tricky zone, Jyotsna. So if you can't be progressive and you can't support a cause and you're not sure you have followed through with the cause, at least don't go the other way. Think about what you're doing. Think about what your campaign is about, and think about the the outcome of it. Think about the potential backlash. Although having said that, I'm not sure if Fab India could ever have dreamt while thinking of a backlash that having some models not wearing bindis would create a furor. So how far do you think? But think about it. I think in the reverse, think about checking stereotyping, Jyotsna. Try to fight stereotyping even if you're not fighting for a particular cause. Pick up stuff that you can do. For example, avoid photoshopping. Let's not do that to our little girls and little boys. Let's at least try and support the stuff that we can. And on the rest of it, frankly, no, my expectations are low. But having said that, I would also say that I think it's a function of the environment we live in. There is generally fear, and sometimes that fear has borne through. I think that's why the retraction is so quick and so swift, because you just don't even want to take that chance. Whether it's a 5%, 10%, 25%, depending on which state of the country you live in, you don't want to take that chance.
Dilip, ending with you, you're in the system. Why are things so acute now? And what would you say? What is your expectation, say, in the next year or so? Are we going to see more of this, or are we going to see them remain passive?
As someone who's advised, more companies than I would dare to reveal, it's in the thousands. And as someone who's run political campaigns, let me tell you that we haven't seen the end of this. This, sadly, isn't the peak point. We are still some distance away from it. We have to buckle in for a rough ride for a while more. But what happens with such things is that they have a kind of what is it called? There's a very elegant word for it, but you lovely ladies are making me forget it. But it's self-limiting in some senses. So much like a virus will run its course through your body, this too will run its course through the body politic. The body politic may be changed forever. That is what I worry about. And it takes too long to repair after. Bit like long COVID. God forbid anyone has it. So I would say that the anxieties are high. The future is not as dark as we point it out now, because the peak is quite close. Because what happens is that when you're seeing such a frothing of it, when there's a venting of it every day, there's bound to be a limit. And the limit will be when there's venting on 2 things a day. Then you'll vent on 3 things a day. Then people will get bored of venting and they'll say, let's go our way. And I'm waiting for that day. And that day is not too far.
Okay, so things can become worse before they get better, but that day still is not too far. Dilip Cherian, image and brand guru, Mitali Mukherjee, senior financial journalist. It was a pleasure speaking with the two of you. Hope to get you back on Talk again someday. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing your
This was
time.
lovely.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Appreciate
Jyotsna.
this.
Sorry for
Thank you.
the tech trouble at the
No,
start.
no,
Thanks, Dilip.
it
Bye.
happens.
Lovely, lovely meeting both of you and talking to you. Thank you. This is the
Thank you
most
so
sane
much.
conversation I've had in a long time. Thank
No,
you.
I go with the USP, Dilip. There's going to be no shouting, no screaming. Everyone has a voice, and I will give them their voice. Nobody wants to hear mine. But if I've got some guests, please listen to them. Otherwise,
Thank
it's
you.
okay, Thank you.